Pull up a stool. Grenada, October 25th, 1983. By dawn, American Rangers were already on the ground at Point Salines Airfield. Marines hitting the beach at Pearls. Operation Urgent Fury was live, the first major American combat operation since Vietnam, and it was moving fast. Too fast for one man. His name was Devlin, DEA, not agency, which made the whole thing more complicated than it needed to be. He'd been embedded on the island for 11 weeks, tracking a Cuban intelligence officer who was using the new airfield construction as cover for something that had nothing to do with tourism. When the invasion kicked off, Devlin was on the wrong side of it. And nobody in the chain of command could agree on whose problem that was. I got the call at 0300 at a staging facility in Barbados. The voice on the other end was a State Department liaison named Breckenridge, calm, precise, the kind of man who'd spent his career delivering bad news in a pleasant tone. He said Devlin had missed 2 consecutive check-ins. Last known position put him in the town of Grenville on the northeast coast, well outside the initial American perimeter. Cuban and Grenadian People's Revolutionary Army units were still active in that sector. I said, "What do you need from me?" He said, "We need someone who can move without a uniform." I said, "How long has he been dark?" He said, 14 hours. 14 hours in a hot zone, with 2 armies shooting at each other and a third that would shoot at anything that moved. I was wheels up inside of 40 minutes. I came in by boat. Small craft, running without lights, landing on a black sand beach 3 kilometers south of Grenville at 06:15. My contact on the ground was a local fisherman named Joseph, mid-50s, had worked with American intelligence intermittently since the late 70s, motivated entirely by a deep and personal hatred of the Cuban presence on his island. Joseph was already waiting when I hit the beach. No greeting, just a nod and a direction. He said, "Your man was seen last night near the market." Then the shooting started, and nobody saw anything after that. I said, "Is he alive?" Joseph said, "Nobody's brought out a body. That's the best I can tell you." Grenville was tense, the way a held breath is tense. The fighting was concentrated on the western side of the island, but the sound of it carried distant percussion. The occasional crack of something closer, helicopters moving in patterns that told a story if you knew how to read them. We moved through the back streets in the gray morning light. Joseph knew every alley, every unlocked gate, every dog that would bark, and every one that wouldn't. This is the part they don't show in the movies. Real field work is slow, patient. You're not running, running draws eyes. You're walking like you belong, reading faces, watching hands, listening for the change in ambient noise that tells you something shifted. We found Devlin at 0840. He was in the back room of a hardware store behind a false wall that Joseph had apparently helped build 3 years earlier for reasons he declined to explain. He'd been there since the previous evening, no radio, low on water, and in possession of a 9mm and approximately 40 rounds he was clearly prepared to use. He looked at me for a long moment when I came through the panel. Then he said, "You're not Rangers." I said, "No." He said, "Who sent you?" I said, "Breckenridge." He closed his eyes briefly. Then he said, "I need to get something out before we move." Of course he did. The Cuban intelligence officer he'd been tracking had left a package in a dead drop 2 days before the invasion. Devlin had retrieved it, but hadn't been able to transmit the contents before communications went dark. Photographs, architectural drawings, the new airfield at Point Salines, the one the Cubans said was for tourism, the one the Reagan administration said was a military staging ground. The drawings proved it, unambiguously. Fuel storage capacity, runway reinforcement specifications, hardened aircraft shelters designed to Cuban military standards. Devlin had been sitting behind that false wall with the single most important piece of documentary evidence of the entire operation, with no way to get it out. We got it out. The extraction took 2 more hours. Joseph's boat, same beach. a Navy vessel offshore that asked no questions and logged nothing in the official record. Devlin debriefed for 16 hours straight. The photographs were on the president's desk within 48 hours. They answered every question the critics had been asking about why American forces were on that island. Devlin got a quiet commendation and went back to work. Joseph got a handshake and an envelope I wasn't told the contents of. I got on a plane and went home. Operation Urgent Fury lasted 8 days. 19 Americans killed. The Cuban and Grenadian forces were defeated. The island was secured. The medical students the administration had pointed to as the justification for the invasion, they came home safe. The airfield drawings never made the front page. That's not how it works. But somewhere in a file that will be declassified long after everyone involved is gone, there's a set of photographs that a DEA officer sat on for 14 hours behind a false wall in a hardware store in Grenville. He didn't run. He held what he had and waited for someone to come find him. In this business, that's not nothing. That's everything. The fiction is the shield. The truth is in the pages. Thank you for listening. See you beyond the Great Filter.